CEO, the Greater Akron Chamber. So glad to have you all here. You know, I was driving over thinking, you know, this election is in May, right? And it's a little bit early to be having these conversations, but at the same time, it's such an important race for Ohio. It's important, we thought, for folks to get a chance to start to get to know who the candidates are, their points of view. This is an annual event that we do with the leadership and elected officials reception that we're doing this evening following this event tonight. And so we like to start with a little discussion about policy and perspectives, and so we thought it was a good match for this event today. I'd like to give a big thank you to our presenting sponsors today, Charter Communications, as well as our premier sponsor, the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, and our supporting sponsors, Akron Children's Hospital, Browse McDowell, Huntington Bank, Key Bank, State and Federal Communications, Retzel and Andrus, and the Summit County Young Republicans. So thank you all for your support for both the event today and also the event this evening. One housekeeping note, I just want to reiterate that while this event is designed for chamber members and being in person for community stakeholders and invited guests, we are going to be streaming this on Facebook. So just make sure you understand that your comments today and the questions today are all public. So you know, people will be able to see this as we go forward. So with that, I would like to introduce the moderator of today's event, Dr. John Green. Dr. Green is the Director Emeritus of the nationally renowned Ray C. Bliss Institute for Applied Politics, a Senior Research Advisor to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, and a political scholar whose insights are frequently reported by local, state, and national media. He's a Distinguished Professor of Political Science, twice selected as Outstanding Faculty Member by the Board of Trustees. His works include 9 books, 32 edited books, 39 refereed journal articles, and 120 other scholarly publications. He's a respected analyst of Ohio and national politics, and his work has been widely cited and widely, not wildly, maybe both wildly and widely. What do you think, John? And quoted by scholars and journalists alike, so we're thrilled to have him here today. At this time, I welcome to the podium, and again, appreciate all of your attendance today. Dr. Green?
Thank you very much, Steve. It's really an honor to be here today. I want to thank all of you for being here, but particularly thank our guests, our candidates who've made time to come and address some of the questions that we might have today. Before we get started, I'd like to just briefly discuss the logistics of our discussion today. We'll begin by asking our candidates to briefly introduce themselves and their hopes for the future. We'll ask them to keep those remarks to 2 or 3 minutes. My mother taught me never to interrupt people when they were talking, but that is the sad duty of moderators occasionally. So I just want to warn our candidates, if they're going on a little too long, I'll wrap on the podium before I interrupt them. But after the candidates have introduced themselves, we will turn to questions and answers from the audience. The Chamber has provided me with a few questions that they would like me to ask, but you are the most important part of this event. So if you have a question, please fill out the card on your seat. One question per person. Although I guess you could reach up to the front. You know, it's kind of interesting. This is like a classroom. No one wants to sit in the front row. I've learned not to take that too personally. But anyway, the chamber staff will collect those questions and bring them to me, and I'll do my best to make sure that we address them all. Before I ask the candidates to introduce themselves, I want to point out that if you want to know more about these candidates, there's a flyer out on the table there that has QR codes where you can read the full bios of the distinguished group that we have here today. So I'd like to begin by asking our candidates to briefly introduce themselves, once again keeping their remarks short, 2 or 3 minutes. And probably the fairest way to do this is to do it in alphabetical order. So I'd like to begin with Matt Dolan.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to do a little home housekeeping first. My wife is a graduate of the Akron Bliss Institute, and unfortunately she could not be here today. I know she's watching, but she wanted to say hello, Jessica Maggard. You would have known her,
thank you.
So thank you for attending tonight. I've had the opportunity to speak before the Chamber as State Senator, so I stand before you as a State Senator, but very honored to stand before you as a candidate for the United States Senate. And I'm running for the Senate because the person who goes to Washington as U.S. Senator better represent Ohio and know Ohio, and that's what my campaign's about. I presume through the questions we're going to talk about the Biden administration, and I think you're not going to see much difference amongst us about the direction that the Biden administration is taking us. But where I'm unique is I have conservative results. I've been in the state legislature, in the House from 2005 to 2010, the Senate from 2017 to today. I'm 31 years a lawyer, and I'm 22 years involved in family businesses. And in my time in the legislature, I brought all that knowledge, and as a result, I've cut your taxes. Taxes since I've been in the legislature have gone down 48%. We cut regulations. We've expanded school choice. So your kids have the ability, as parents, to decide where you're going to go to educate your children, because education's the key, and we no longer have to worry about where. We just have to worry about that they do get educated. You know, I've been relentless in my efforts to make certain that Lake Erie becomes an economic engine for Ohio. It's not just about boating and fishing and development. It's about water being the next natural resource crisis, and you better send somebody to Washington who understands that and will fight for the Midwest and the Great Lakes region, because if you look around this country, droughts are everywhere, and sooner or later, manufacturers in those areas and food processors in those areas are going to say, I need to go to Ohio, and we need to be ready. So I have put that together, and that's what I want to do in Washington, is be the guy that goes and fights for Ohio. And the other thing that I can do that makes me unique is, and you guys know it, is that being a representative, being a senator, whether it's at the federal level or the local level, having that public sector experience, because I engage. And when the chamber needed some things done in Columbus to further your membership's ability to have enhanced businesses, to hire more employers, to build more capital, to build or buy more equipment, you came to me and we got it done. And I enjoy talking to you on Monday morning as a state senator, talking about what we've done and what we can continue to do. I'm here to tell you today I can continue to do that in Washington. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Let's turn now to Mike Gibbons.
I'm Mike Gibbons, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm a businessman. I'm not a politician. Is this working? You hear me? Okay. And I'm a constitutional conservative without apology. If you don't believe me, ask Rand Paul. He's endorsed me, and I guarantee you he would not endorse a rhino. I grew up, actually I was born in the top of a double house in the inner city Cleveland, and when we made it big, we moved to Parma. My dad was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach, and our family was about sports. My dad always had to have 2 full-time jobs, so he had 6 people in the family. And when he lost his second full-time job, he started a waterproofing company. He waterproofed houses till he was 80 years old. My dad was the best man I've ever known. He's still, and he achieved his American dream. He's still the winningest coach in Ohio history. But unfortunately, we were always one mortgage payment away from not being able to make our mortgage, or I'm sorry, one auto repair bill away from not being able to make our mortgage payment. And I decided to change that. So I learned about work at an early age, had a paper route. I worked in a factory on a bandsaw. I worked in a greenhouse, and I poured concrete. And I've achieved success in something completely different. 30 years ago, I started an investment banking firm, a middle market investment bank in Cleveland. And I started with a desk and a phone. And today that investment banking firm is among the best known and largest middle market firms in America. I believe in the American dream. I believe it's still there. I'm upset when I hear a Democrat say that the American dream is dead. So you've got a lot of choices in this race. And I can tell you, I don't believe you can entrust our nation's future to career politicians, party insiders, or people who put their finger in the air to figure out what they're going to say next. I can tell you that I am tired of throwing things at my television. I'm tired of the way this country's going. I believe this nation is in peril. And if you don't believe me, just think about the last 10 months with Joe Biden. But I can tell you, I think we need to turn it around, and people that love this country need to stand up and fight, and that's what I intend to do. If you'd asked me, or if you had told me I was going to be doing this 5 years ago, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. But I believe this upcoming election, 2022, is going to be one of the most important elections of our lifetime. We need to turn this around. As I said, you have a lot of choices here. Read our resumes, look at what we've accomplished in our lives, figure out who's most qualified, and vote for that person. I believe you'll figure out that I'm the most qualified. And I can tell you, I'm looking for your support, and I'm looking for your vote. And thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. Now let us turn to Bernie Moreno.
So the good news is that you can see that we alphabetize ourselves sitting down. So we've already passed the first test. You see that? Not bad. Second thing I want to do is introduce my wife, Bridget. We've been married 32 years. She travels with me everywhere I go. It's very appreciated. It's something I never got to do as an entrepreneur. So thank you, Bridget, for being here. Appreciate it. Cue round of applause. A tough crowd. Anyway, a lot of you may know me because I was involved in the Greater Cleveland Partnership as a board member there for about 15 years. Moved to Cleveland 16 and a half years ago. You may know that. But you may not know that I was actually born south of here. And I know to you here, that means Canton. But in reality, it's Columbia, South America. And I moved to the U.S. legally when I was a kid with my 5 brothers, my sister, my mom, and my dad. We came here because this is the most special and unique country on earth, and my parents wanted us to live the American dream. My mom made certain that we understood that when we came to America, it means that we had to become Americans, and we had to learn the language, understand the culture, and understand that you're only limited by your ideas and your dreams. She insisted that we study the American history lesson very carefully, so I took that advice well. I read the Declaration of Independence, the 85 Federalist Papers, the Constitution, and there's 2 things I need you to know. 1, I aced that test. 2, Joe Biden's mom definitely did not make him do the same thing. And that's the problem that we have today. And that's, as Mike said, this is a very important election. Because what we've seen him do in the last 9 months is move this country towards a place that I recognize, this hard push towards the socialist left. We cannot go there. It does not end well. Socialism has created one thing and one thing only: extreme misery for anybody who lives under that system. I was able to take the fortunate gift that my mom gave me of America. I came to Cleveland and bought a dealership that sold 4 cars a month and had 30 people working there. I turned it into a dealership group that sold 20,000 cars a year with over 1,200 people working right here in Ohio. I sold that business 2.5 years ago and started a technology company. And even though everybody told me Ohio is the wrong place, remember Bill? Ohio is the wrong place to do this. Not Bill. Bill said the opposite. And so I did build the company here. We have 65 people, American citizens, working in Cleveland, creating a technology company that will, I believe, be a tech unicorn very, very soon. We use blockchain technology to digitize car titles. We've launched in 2 states. We'll be live in about 23 states at the end of next year. And I'm very, very excited to do that. The reason I'm running for Senate is because I know that we cannot head in that direction. And I also know that if we keep sending the same kinds of people to DC, we're going to get the exact same kind of results. People who don't know what it's like to actually create jobs, create employment, and create opportunity for others. We've sent politicians that talk, and have very little action to back it up. That's what makes me different. I need your support. I'm not somebody who's taking corporate PAC money, the only one. I'm not somebody who's well-known and run many times. So I need your support. Look forward to having a great discussion with you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to Neil Patel.
Okay, my name is Neil Patel. I'd like to first thank you, Chamber of Commerce Akron here. Thank you for having us. And one more thing about Summit County. Actually, I'm a financial advisor. I do lots of business in this county. This is my favorite county as well. My name is Neil Patel. I'm from Delaware County. I was born in India, and I've been here since 1979. I became citizen of the United States in '94, just like Bernie passed the test. The same thing, I have done that too. Okay, and actually right now, when I moved from Chicago to Ohio in '85, we bought a Dunkin' Donut business. We got 4 Dunkin' Donuts in Columbus area. And we employ more than 1,000 employees so far. Besides the Dunkin' Donut, actually, I own a hotel right now, and I have urgent care as well. Okay, and I'm financial advisor. I'm a small businessman. I'm not a career politician. I'm a former Democrat. I was a former Democrat, but I'm actually stronger conservative right now. As a former Democrat, I was a conservative Democrat. People didn't like me over there. I was a pro-life and pro-gun. Okay, that's why I just changed my party to the Republican. 2020, actually, I did campaigning for President Trump across the Ohio, and I enjoy that campaigning. I meet lots of people. And other thing about my family, I've been married with my wife since last 31 years. I got married in Columbus. In 2007, if you know about it, an ambassador from India to United States, and we work hard and we bring the lots of job to our country here in our state. We have actually bring more than, I can say more than at least 20,000 jobs in the United States from India to investment here. That's why I've been known as a person. And I like to talk about just the other thing is about business. I'm a small businessman. I'm never held any office. And I like to exactly get your support for your votes and your support. I would love to get the support. Before I closing, I like to say that this is our Mother America. This is our Mother America, and this is our culture. If somebody don't like our culture, our custom, or our constitution, get the hell out from here. They not belongs to our country. The reason I'm running for this office, I forgot to talk about that. The reason I'm running for this office is, actually, we have lots of veterans. They are homeless. They don't have even food. And lots of elderly people, they don't have even supplemental B to money for that. Second reason I'm running for this office, we are getting actually, our people is so good, beautiful hearted, very kind hearted people. We are getting refugees from all over the world. Okay? We are give them the refugee status in our country here. Just recently we got the Afghanistan people here, 100,000. Joe Biden brought them here, Afghanistan people. And people
Excuse me, sir, we need to move on. Could you wrap it up?
Yeah. Okay, and that's the reason actually I'm running for this office, because people don't know about exactly the Afghanistan people right now, refugees coming as we don't know who is the Taliban or who is actually jihadi. That's why I'm running to educate the people from our state. I've been visited all 88 counties of Ohio, and I've been all over the state. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we'd like to turn to Mark Pikita.
Thank you. I'm Mark Pikita, and I'd like to be your next U.S. Senator. I want to thank the Chamber for having me. The Center for Christian Virtue chose to leave me off the stage on Sunday, so thank you very much for having us here. I'm not a career politician. I've never run for office before. I'm not a lawyer, and I did not go to an Ivy League school. I'm just like you. We have a lot to fix in this country. I want to go to Washington to fix it. I'm a business person. I'm used to making commitments and following through on those commitments. Why am I running? I'm running because at the end of 2019, I sold a business that I built for over 20 years. It was an IT staffing business in Columbus. It grew to about $100 million in revenue and 800 employees. Over that 20-plus years, we hired thousands of people, created thousands of jobs. I know how to create jobs. I also know how the government can get in the way of jobs being created. I say I live the American dream because I come from a family, my grandfathers were coal miners, and my parents had outhouses when they were kids. I was lucky to go to Ohio State. I'm a Buckeye. And I am doing this because when I sold the company and realized I lived the American dream, I thought that our children and our grandchildren will not have the same opportunity I did if we keep going in the same direction. And then I looked at Rob Portman and I thought he hasn't done a single thing we sent him to office to do. And we're now seeing that he is an absolute rhino swamp creature. I'm the only candidate who will stand up here and say that about Rob Portman because I'm not afraid of Rob Portman. I'm also not afraid of the Ohio Republican Party or Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine is at the core of every problem we've got right now. He may not have started it, but he has certainly exacerbated it. He's done nothing on opioids. He's done nothing on the loss of jobs. We have not brought business here. He is allowing Ohio to turn into District 12 of the Hunger Games, and it's just got to stop. In terms of policy, I'm the only candidate that's been talking about policy intently for 2 years. I registered to primary Rob Portman in October of 2019. Everybody else got in, as my campaign team likes to say, after it was cool. It wasn't cool for me to be primarying a sitting U.S. Senator with the kind of money and the kind of clout that Rob Portman has. So this here, and we've got these out front, is a 21-point policy commitment from me to you. If you elect me, I will go to Washington, and you can see that this is what I will do, what I believe in, what I will vote for, and what I will legislate for when I'm there. I've also got a Senate pledge. I've signed the pledge. In business, we're used to signing contracts and making commitments. I signed the pledge, and you know exactly where I stand on things like America First and things like that. So once again, I'm Mark Pikita. I'm a true fighter. I'm helping fight for changes in education in Ohio and really reforming the corrupt Ohio Republican Party, which maybe you don't know has a $2 million accounting inconsistency that Bob Paduchek, the chairman, is unwilling to have audited. The bylaws of the ORP say that the ORP should be audited every year. We haven't had an audit for 16 years. To me, that's unacceptable. Once again, Mark Pikita, thank you very much. I would like to be your next U.S. Senator.
Thank you. Now, last but not least, Jane Timkin.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me here. Thanks to the Chamber. Thank you all for being here. I'm Jane Timkin. I'm running to be your next United States Senator to fight for the America First agenda. I'm in this fight for our faith, our families, and our freedoms. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, far south from here. I'm the granddaughter of Irish immigrants. My grandparents came here for their own American dream. My grandfather had no education but worked in a rubber factory, not here in Akron, in Boston. And my grandmother worked as a maid. And I've had the pleasure of achieving the American dream, and it's because of that I'm in this fight for your American dream and your family's American dream. My mother immigrated to this country from Scotland. She came here and met my dad the first week she was here. I told her she should have held out for a taller, better-looking guy. But they had a wonderful marriage. My parents instilled in me the values of hard work and a good education, and I went to Harvard. That was where I got my first taste of those East Coast elites, so to speak. I showed up and said, "I'm from Ohio," and they said, "Where's Ohio?" Believe me, that kind of elitist East Coast attitude is prevalent in Washington, D.C. right now. But I got to tell you, I still had some fun at Harvard. I played Radcliffe rugby. Rugby's a tough sport, no pads, no helmets, and lots of mud, just like politics. So I'm well prepared for this race. But look, I met my husband. We moved here to Canton, Ohio. We raised our 2 kids and live on a farm. I practiced law just down the road in Stark County. But I became very involved in politics more than a decade ago because I started to see that the Democrats were pushing for government takeover of our lives. I was the vice chair of the Stark County Republican Party, and then when I was asked to step up to take on a corrupt Ohio Republican Party, I did. I did it with the support and endorsement of President Trump, and I'm very proud of my leadership of the Ohio Republican Party. I unified the party and turned it into a well-oiled machine that delivered conservative victories up and down the ballot all across Ohio, especially in 2018 and more so in 2020. I delivered Ohio for President Trump by more than 8.5 points. Look, folks, when Senator Portman announced he was not going to seek re-election, I had an inkling of how bad Joe Biden and the Democrats' control of this country would be. It's far worse. President Trump and the America First agenda brought us a strong and promising America. Joe Biden and the Democrats are giving us a weak and unpromising America. You see it every day: rising inflation, rising crime, the disaster in Afghanistan. We are weak on the foreign policy stage. China is our greatest enemy and our greatest economic and political threat. We need people who understand that in this race. I've been in the trenches fighting for the America First agenda. I'm the only candidate that spent 150,000 miles on my car almost every day, all across the state of Ohio. I know Ohio values. I know what policies from Washington work for Ohioans and which ones don't. My priorities are going to be jobs and the economy. We need our workforce back. I hear it every single day as I travel around Ohio. I was just up at Mahoning County Career Center. They're training the kids for the jobs of the future. We need more of that. I'm going to be prioritizing jobs, economy, energy independence, a strong, secure border, combating the opioid epidemic, and fighting for a secure and prosperous America. I hope you join me in this fight. I got a lot of grit and I got a lot of grace, and I will be your best United States Senator. Please join me, Jane Timkin. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have a few people standing around in the back of the room. We have some empty seats up front and in some other places, so please feel free to fill in. Now we're going to turn to questions and answers, including questions from you all. But just to get it started, I'll ask a couple of questions to our candidates. I'd like the candidates to be brief in their answers so that we can cover more issues as we go forward. And I'll just call on some names to get us started and sort of mix it and match among our guests this evening. So my first question has to do with the perennial issue of tariffs. I want to ask all of the candidates, what role do you see tariffs as playing in helping the United States maintain its economic status here and abroad? And let's start with Bernie Moreno.
Sure. We're going to stay seated in
Yeah.
interest of speed. I think is probably the best thing. But I think what we shouldn't, ideally, in an ideal world, we shouldn't need tariffs. However, we are competing with a country called China that doesn't believe in playing by any set of standard rules at all. So when President Trump put those tariffs in place, it was very important because what we have to do is we have to provide incentives for manufactured goods to come back to the U.S. in 5 critical industries: pharmaceuticals, personal protective equipment, energy, of course, steel, and the most important one of all, because Taiwan will be conquered before the end of this next summer coming up, is semiconductor chips. So these tariffs are really important as a tool to make certain that countries like China are playing fair.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mark Pikita. What are your views on tariff?
Well, I agree with Bernie on tariffs, but I also think that what we really need to do, tariffs aren't going to do it. We do need to use our financial might to combat China and the lack of the level playing field, but we also need to form an alliance in that area with like India, Japan, Taiwan, and really put the pressure on China in terms of military threat. And the first thing I would do as a senator in terms of travel outside of the U.S. is go to Taiwan, stand with their people there, and tell them that the U.S. has their back.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mike Gibbons. What do you think about tariffs?
Interestingly enough, about 3 years ago, I was one of the 3 finalists for Deputy Secretary of Commerce, and I found out a lot about tariffs. A lot of people had the impression that Donald Trump liked tariffs, and I can tell you he considered it a tool, and he would much rather have free trade, and the rest of the world doesn't believe in that. A lot of industries are protected, and obviously the ideal situation would be no tariffs, but we need to use them just as Donald Trump did, as a tool. And he was making a lot of progress, and I think that given another 4 years, we could have had free trade, at least with the EU and some of the others that were trying to finally figuring out what he was all about. So tariffs are a tool. It would be in our toolbox if we needed them, but free trade is best for all.
Thank you. Let's turn to Jane Timkin. What about tariffs?
As I said, my priority is jobs and the economy. Ohio is a great manufacturing state. We need to put in place the conditions to continue to produce in Ohio and in America. Look, President Trump and his America First agenda, which I'm running on, is the exact agenda. He put those tariffs in place because what was happening was China, one of our greatest economic threats and political and military threats, was dumping products onto the United States at lower prices, which was resulting in the job losses we've seen in Ohio and across the country. I know firsthand, my husband was at the table with President Trump negotiating those tariffs. But the reality is, we need to remember the forgotten man and woman. And those tariffs were working. And in fact, in Clyde, Ohio, Whirlpool brought back 3,000 jobs to produce dishwashers and washing machines. That's the kind of policies we need. We can talk about living in an ideal world of free trade, but my priority is always going to be United States jobs. And it is part of our national security to make sure we can produce in this country. We need to make sure that we are producing steel. We need to make sure that we're producing tanks. We need to make sure that we're producing pharmaceuticals and all of those things that China prevented us from getting during the COVID pandemic. We need to make sure that we are prioritizing America. That will always be my number one goal.
Thank you. Matt Dolan, what do you think about tariffs?
So tariffs are taxes, and we end up paying those taxes. Our manufacturers pay those. And taxes are necessary, should be as low as possible to create revenue for the government to provide important infrastructure, healthcare, and things like that. The way to don't use a tariff to change behavior, you change behavior. We need to call out China for being a currency manipulator, because it doesn't matter what the tariff is. If they're going to constantly set their currency 40 cents, 50 cents lower than the dollar, we're always going to be at a disadvantage. We got to call them out for their IP theft. We've got to, as earlier said, change our relationships with other nations. We create new and better trading partners. Let's face it, there's a lot of great things we do in America, and we've got to bring back domestic manufacturing. We've got to have chip manufacturing done here. We got to get the EPA to allow us to mine that. But there's some we're not going to be able to do because it's just not cost effective. But Vietnam can do them, Indonesia can do them, India can do them. The more we create new economic trade partners, new economic allies, the more pressure that puts on China to either you have to look inward and solve their problems because they're not producing as much, or work fairly with the rest of the world.
Thank you. Let's turn to Neil Patel. What do you think about tariffs?
Actually, a tariff, just like Matt said, that that's a taxes. We should exactly at this reasonable amount, we should charge the taxes, because whatever we bring, that any manufacturing on any item from anywhere in the world, we are paying the taxes here too, like tariff. We should at least charge, just like President Trump says, we should at least charge a little bit amount, certain amount, I don't know exact amount to be, but we should charge a little bit tariff. I know we are competing, but still actually I think, important thing exactly right now, actually, Taiwan, maybe China taking over by the next summer, he says that, Bernie says that. But before he's taking over, if we do something about on Chinese product, if we stop buying the Chinese product from our country here, I can say if you only 90 days, if we stop buying the Chinese product, I think we can be a lot better shape than today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to another question, and that's the question of workforce development. We have several questions about policies that you would pursue to help fill the skills gap that we have here in Ohio so that we can fill in-demand jobs in manufacturing and other areas. Mike Gibbons, let's start with you in workforce development.
Sure. It's become a doctrine of the left that everybody should go to college. And I can tell you not everybody should go to college. But what our educational system should do is prepare people to make a living. And as the left wing has infiltrated the large cities in our state, we've seen what has happened to their educational systems. All of them are either D's or F's. And people are being turned out. Not only can they not read and write, but they have no marketable skills. That has to change if I had my way, and hopefully I can have my way. We need to do life training for people that allows them to make a living. We've got to be conscious of the fact that the world's changing. They need to be trained in coding and technology and all the things that are required now. But I don't know if you've tried to get a plumber lately, but it's not the easiest thing to do. We need to find people or provide people with the means of making a living. And a lot of the things that we need done can make those people a great living. We need to convince our government, and if we go out and vote and take back the Senate and the House, we may be able to pull some of this off. But let's not send everybody to college. 30% of our college graduates are now majoring in some kind of victimology. And the only job they can have is a diversity and inclusion consultant at some company. When the problem's solved, they got to find another thing to complain about. We need to have them learning how to make a living. And everything the Republican Party should do should be pushed in that direction.
Thank you. Jane Timkin, Workforce Development.
Workforce development is actually one of my biggest priorities in this race and will be one of my biggest priorities in the United States Senate. Look, as I said, I just came from touring the Mahoning County Career Service Center and Technical Center. This is where they have high school kids getting STEM education. They are being trained in a variety of fields, aeronautics, robotics. They are being trained with culinary skills. They're being trained for the jobs of the future. My priority is to make sure we have a ready workforce. We need to make sure that we have kids who have those skills. As I travel around Ohio, there's so many employers who cannot find enough people to get to work, but they also don't have the skills. One of my policy proposals is to actually incentivize employers in our investing in our local community colleges and our career technical service centers. If they put their technology into those schools, train those students, and then actually hire those students, they should be getting a tax credit for it. It is a win-win for our kids, it's a win-win for our communities, and it's a win-win for our businesses. Look, the Democrats want to prioritize the Green New Deal, a tax on fossil fuels, and they do not understand that the key to the American dream is a good education, and technical skills is what I consider part of a good education. It's when we talk about bringing manufacturing back and having a good economy, this is going to be an essential part of it, and I'm going to prioritize workforce development because it's about our communities and our kids and our future.
Thank you. Let's hear about workforce development from Neil Patel.
Just as Jane says about the career center. Career center is most important. We should have that, and we should actually train our people. Because anything coming from anywhere in the world and skilled job, if you don't have the skilled job, if you don't train our people, they cannot find the job. We want to make sure actually career center across our state and across the country, they train proper our people. Because I think in middle time, I think somebody tried to bring the windmill, and that time we didn't have actually trained people. They have to bring from outside. That is the reason actually career center and skilled people is more important. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear now from Bernie Moreno's workforce development.
Yeah, so I'll answer the question this way. I'm running for the United States Senate. So from my perspective, this is the best thing I can do as United States Senator is to move this power to the states and the counties and the local places where it belongs. As much as it's a federal issue, it's very small, which is basically making certain that it's easy to get Pell Grants for the types of work that you're talking about, Mike, to plumbers and tradespeople, expand Pell Grants for that. But we don't want the federal government mandating to states and local communities what to do with education. That's very important. But let me just say that when I was here in Cleveland, I was the vice chair of the board at Tri-C. I was the chairman of the board of Cleveland State University. I was involved in lots of educational institutions. We have a myth that's going on right now that we have a skills gap today that's different than what it was a year and a half ago. That's not true. What we have is a great resigning because the government has paid people an enormous amount of money to stay home and not work. It has nothing to do with a new skills gap. Now, we did have one before, but that's not the reason why you go to Panera and you can't get somebody to help you. That's because you're paying people to stay home. The last piece of it is we have to make certain that we hold these universities and community colleges accountable for results. When I was chair of CSU, we lowered tuition, we made it easier for kids to get books in a cost-effective manner, and most importantly, we raised our graduation rate. When I was at Tri-C, the graduation rate for black students was 1%. 1%. For Hispanics, it was 3%. And they wanted me to give millions of dollars to help them. I'm thinking, how do you give money to somebody who's failing at that level? What Bridget and I did is we went around the country, we found best practices, and we put a scholarship program in place that's graduated kids at 83%, and they're all black and Hispanic kids. So when you do the work and you understand what moves the needle, you can get it done, but that's not going to be me as your United States Senator. I hope it's all of you in this crowd that hold your schools, your colleges, and your universities accountable.
Thank you. Matt Dolan, tell us about workforce development.
Thank you. So here's an example where I can tell you what I've actually done for workforce development in Ohio. I'm not going to have time to go all through it, and there's some in this audience who understand it. But over the last 4 years, we've put in Ohio Tech Cred, IMAP, and industrial credentials. And what those are designed to do is to provide an opportunity for every child that whether they want a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree, a certificate, skills manufacturing, or become a skilled laborer, that the employer, the universities, the 2-year degrees, and the students are all working together, and they have access to funds, whether you're an employer on the Tech Cred that you need to upskill some of your current employees, or you need to bring in new employees. When the training is done, you get a grant. IMAP is for the individual. Industrial credentials, you heard about Mahoning County Career Center. I guarantee you the people that Jane saw today were there because of what I passed in the industrial credentials 4 years ago and upped it 2 years ago. As your U.S. Senator, you do have to recognize that there is a cost to these programs. My son just started welding school. He went 2 years of college, it wasn't for him, came back, I'm thrilled. Now, in order to step foot in day one of welding school, he had $660 worth of equipment that he had to buy. Now, he's fortunate. He had a dad that gave him a low interest loan, and he was able to meet that. But other kids aren't. And so as a U.S. Senator, you do expand Pell Grants. You do expand. Right now, Pell Grants only go to students who are on a 2-year or 4-year degree. And what Pell Grants are designed to do is to pay for things outside of school. So your tuition, but maybe you need help with books. Maybe you need help with transportation. Maybe you need help with housing. If you expand Pell Grants to these students, then they're not prohibited from getting that $660 for welding masks, for welding gloves, for steel-toed boots. And you can encourage these kids to go into, with the program that we've created at the state level and some help from the federal level, we can expand people's desire to get in whatever workforce they want to join. That access has to be available in Ohio.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to Mark Pikita. Tell us about workforce development.
I thought we were Republicans here. I thought that we were all about smaller government, personal responsibility, free markets, capitalism, liberty, and freedom. I think the problem we've got with workforce development is we have too much government in the process. We have too much government in the educational process. We are here today where we are because we've got government in too much. We need to reduce the free money coming for colleges that has created this problem of them not having to be accountable for graduates being able to go out and earn a living. Right now, they are generating a great stream of fast food workers. As well, if we allow the free markets and capitalism to drive education, training, and jobs, we will be much better off. We have got to stop thinking that government can solve every problem. We're sounding more like Democrats.
Thank you. We have a question here that's your views on two specific pieces of legislation that are pending before Congress. And I'd like you all to very briefly tell us where you stand on those. One of them is the infrastructure bill that was passed by the Senate and is being debated in the House, and the other is the Ohio Fairness Act. And let's begin with Neil Patel. How do you feel about these two pieces of legislation?
Okay, the infrastructure bill right now, I think they was working on $3.5 trillion, and now I think they are negotiating with $1.7 trillion. As far as my knowledge, I didn't actually let today's news anything, but they are working on the Senate. Actually, I think we don't need to actually get this bill passed right now, as per as my knowledge, because we already give out lots of money. And infrastructure money is already give out more money there. That's why, as far as my knowledge, actually, we should not pass this bill. If I'm a senator, I wouldn't support this bill.
And the Ohio Fairness Act, do you have a position on that?
Which one is?
The Ohio Fairness Act?
I don't know about on that.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move to Bernie Moreno. Where do you stand on these pieces of legislation?
So this is a very confusing topic because the media loves to mix this up like a little blender, okay? So let's separate this out. We passed a $1.9 trillion bill in the first quarter of this year. It's called the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion. It's in law and passed. Then the Democrats said, we're going to have this giant infrastructure plan. They redefined the word. By the way, infrastructure doesn't mean roads, bridges, and broadband. It means everything, right? And what the Republicans did, unfortunately, because it was a bad negotiation tactic, is they tried to separate real infrastructure from social infrastructure. They passed a $1.2 trillion bill in the Senate, of which it's debatable if that's real infrastructure. And forget that debate for a second. And then, of course, there's the $3.5 trillion bill, which is insane. I'll give you a little for instance. If the government deems you to be a journalist, it pays half your salary. Think about how crazy that is. Okay? Forget that bill. That's lunacy. Your question, I assume, was the 1.2. The $1.2 trillion bill in an environment in which we've already spent too much money, in which we already have hyperinflation knocking at our door. We should not spend any more money. Last year, we collected more tax revenue than at any time in our history. What I offered as an alternative back in May, because some of my opponents like to say that this is because you want to be sucking up to Donald Trump. Not true. Back in May, what I said is reuse the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan money and use that for real infrastructure. Here's the good news. The Senate passed that bill by overwhelming bipartisan margin last week. It just needs to go to the House, and then the states, the counties, and the cities can use that money for real infrastructure. So that's what we should be doing in terms of the infrastructure bill. I'm not familiar with the Ohio Fairness. That sounds like an Ohio bill. This is the U.S. Senate panel, so I'm not familiar with that bill.
Let's turn to Jane Timkin. What do you think about these bills?
Well, first of all, I think where I differ with President Trump is on spending, and we spent way too much money in the past few years, and I am a conservative, and I am a fiscal conservative. The Democrats tied this $1.2 trillion, how many dollars of infrastructure to the budget reconciliation bill. That's what's going on right now, and they would not pass one without the other. Look, I am just like all of you. I travel the roads of Ohio. I'm from Cincinnati, where the famous Brent Spence Bridge is there. I know we need to invest in our infrastructure, but we are spending way too much money and not this infrastructure bill, because it's not just roads and bridges and broadband, which I support as infrastructure. It's got a whole bunch of other projects that the Democrats are pushing, whether it's their Green New Deal energy policies, money money that is not going for infrastructure. So I would not support this bill. I would have not have voted for it. As I said, I've been a lawyer. I've negotiated several deals. In my opinion, the Democrats did not negotiate in good faith. And when I'm dealing with the other side and Democrats, I will only negotiate with them in good faith. I'm going to be fighting for our values, for our conservative values, to make sure that we're not spending too much money. Because right now, our country cannot afford it. We are putting ourselves on an economic cliff. I'm in this fight for our families, for our kids' futures, and if we keep spending this money, we will not have an America, and I'm in this fight for America.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mike Gibbons. What about these pieces of legislation?
Well, I'll answer the federal one if you want me to. This country's broke, and under any circumstances, we need to reduce our spending. The pandemic, you can make half a case that if the government's telling you not to work, they've got to help you out. It's gotten out of control. Everybody can work right now, and there's no reason for any additional aid to anybody that doesn't want to work. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I studied economics. And in undergrad, graduate school, and I taught economics. Pretty much every book we use, we can throw out the window. There's a new theory out there called modern monetary theory, where you can spend as much money as you want, and it doesn't matter as long as we're the world reserve currency. And effectively, in a nutshell, that's what it is. We've got to have somebody in the U.S. Senate that understands economics. We have to have somebody that can talk intelligently and fight for the things that, frankly, are going to save this country. So as far as the infrastructure bill goes, a lot of the infrastructure they talked about is already funded by gas tax and other cash that's already being generated. This is just another big spending bill, and I would have voted against it. I don't think you negotiate with socialists, and that's exactly what happened. And we cannot allow this gross spending to continue, or this country is not going to be the same country we know right now.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mark Pikita. What do you think of these pieces of legislation?
So on the infrastructure bill, I wouldn't have voted for the infrastructure bill because there's not that much infrastructure in it, as others have said. But I do believe that at the national level, we do have to have an infrastructure policy. It needs to be fixing things like the Brent Spence Bridge that Jane mentioned. I mean, we had John Boehner and we had Mitch McConnell running the show, and they couldn't get that bridge fixed. So the ineffective nature of the people that we send to D.C. creates these kind of issues. That bridge is falling apart, so we need to get it fixed. You need to send citizen candidates and business people to Washington to do that. I-75, do you know that I-75 is called the Kanban Highway because of how important it is to manufacturing and the auto industry? I would propose that we put together a coalition of states that have I-75 running through it and start working together to figure out what kind of real infrastructure we need. And then broadband and telephone, cellular telephone. I've been traveling to all the rural counties, and they are angry down there because they are not getting their fair share of these kind of infrastructure bills. We electrified the United States. Everywhere. You can get electricity everywhere, right? But you can't get cell service everywhere, and you can't get broadband. We ought to be focusing on those and not social infrastructure. In terms of the Ohio Fairness Act, I don't know what it is, but it really doesn't matter, because we've got a General Assembly that gets nothing done. And if it does, it's so watered down that it's meaningless. So I wouldn't worry about it. Whatever it is will have no impact.
Thank you. Matt Dolan, what do you think about these bills?
So it's really important who you send to Washington, because you can't just have people come and tell you why they can't do something. You got to be for something. This infrastructure bill is about infrastructure. This bill goes to build roads and bridges. And the Brent Spence Bridge in Cincinnati would be the primary benefactor of this. 3% of our GDP goes over this. Folks, we haven't passed an infrastructure bill. We passed a small one in 2015. We hadn't passed one before that for over a decade. The gas tax needs a bill. That's where this money's coming from. It's a highway transportation fund, and then it's coming from CORES relief. It didn't just happen now. It's always been in the bill negotiated. This bill talks about ports. This bill talks about broadband. This bill talks about electric grid. This bill talks about being prepared for the electric generation. This bill is what Ohio needs. You cannot say you're going to go to Washington and fight for Ohio when the first opportunity you have to say is, I'm going to protect Ohio, and you say no. And maybe you said no because before this vote took place, President Trump said he's not going to endorse anybody who says, I'm going to support the infrastructure. I am the only one that's saying you support it because you go there, you engage, you work. All this social stuff is in the other bill. All of the stuff that's in this bill is infrastructure that we need today. And if any of you run a business, you know how important it is to have safe roads, safe bridges, good broadband, good ports, good rails. That's what this does. So you have to go to Washington, be willing to engage, spare it down. This bill does not raise taxes, does not increase the debt because it's for money already appropriated. Now, the fairness doctrine, these guys all know. We all talked about it Sunday night. It's the ability to say to businesses, you're not going to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation. We are losing population in this state. Why would we, and we don't have enough workers. Why would we have something in place that says, if you happen to be gay, we don't want you to work here? I am the only I'm one of 4 Republicans that voted for it in 2009, and I'm a co-sponsor of the bill now. If we're truly talking about getting businesses running, to be innovative, to be creative, to create an environment for growth, then we should not be discriminating against folks. And these folks answered this the other night, and they all said they were against it. Maybe Mark didn't because he wasn't there.
Thank you. Let's move on to another question. You know, it's interesting how words come and go, and a word that I thought we wouldn't see again, at least in my lifetime, is the word stagflation. And we have a couple of questions about that issue. And of course, what we mean by that is a period of time when you have rising unemployment and rising inflation. So I'd like to hear what you all have to say about policies that would address stagflation. And let's begin with Bernie Moreno.
All right, I don't want to make this a debate. The $1.9 trillion, Matt, has not been allocated. That's what they're trying. Then they don't need to pass the bill. I must have missed that vote. So if the $1.2 trillion bill has already been passed, then I guess we're not talking about anything. The idea that you can spend $1.2 trillion, think about this, just follow me for a second. You can spend $1.2 trillion and not raise taxes and not add to the debt. Man, I'm going to buy some car dealerships back because that is a whole new level of madness listen, we have enough problems with misinformation coming from the media and the Democrats. Listen, I'm all for infrastructure. I owned a dealership that would shut down because that bridge was closed. We would have to shuttle customers back and forth from Mercedes-Benz and Fort Mitchell to Cincinnati, and that bridge delay could be 2 hours. But you were in the Senate when that bridge was broken. Why didn't you fix it then? And so to now talk about this as if nobody was ever involved is what made me leave the life that I've worked 54 years to earn, is to run for office now because I'm so tired of politicians who say one thing and do another. You cannot add $1.2 trillion in spending and not raise taxes or add to the debt. We already have that money. The state of Ohio was showered with so much money that we are giving money away for you to get vaccinated. All right, that money exists and it should be redeployed. Why are we going to have stagflation? We're going to have it, by the way, because inflation doesn't come with a light switch. It spools up. What you're going to see in February, March, and April is things that you haven't seen since 78, 79, and 80, because we're spending money like we're out of control at the same time as we're crippling the supply side of our economy. We have to have policies that make sense. The difference is that Mike and I know what it's like to run a business. We know when government does things, what it affects us and how it affects us. We need people like that in D.C. If we don't do that, we're going to be left to a country that is going to go absolutely, I don't think we're quite broke there, Mike, but we're heading right off that cliff. We have to stop that.
Thank you. Well, let's turn to Jane Timkin. What do you think about stagflation?
Sure. Well, I'm not going to spar with all of them. I'm just going to beat all of them. Look, it is a serious issue that's facing this country. I had a discussion last night with someone about the possibility of the fact that we may need to devalue the dollar. What we have, and I think we are heading towards, is, and it's in large part because of the incredible amount of spending that's coming out of Washington, D.C. If you add up all of the CARES Act money, all of the COVID relief bills, the $1.9 trillion that they passed and spent and distributed this past March, we have an influx of huge amounts of money coming into our country. It is causing inflation. And the other aspect that's causing inflation is that we do not have enough people getting back to work. I know every one of you has tried to go to the grocery store. You don't have enough people there. You've tried to get things off the shelves. That's not there. We have a shortage of goods in this country. It's because we don't have people working. We have a supply chain issue. And we also are paying people to stay home. And we need to stop these policies. That's why I'm in this fight. We cannot continue to spend this money. We need to encourage people to get back to work. We have to have fiscal policy that puts this country on the right path, and the Democrats right now are taking us off a cliff. If we continue to spend this money, if we raise taxes, and we encourage people to stay home and not get back into the workforce, we are going to be in a situation like Japan was in stagflation in the 90s. I don't want that for my kids. Do you want that for your kids? I want a bright future for our children and our grandchildren and our communities, and it's part of our economic and foreign policy security. We need people who understand that and who are going to stand up and fight for it.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mike Gibbons. What about stagflation?
Well, if you listen to our administration, they're saying that this inflation, they're still saying that this inflation is transitory. I can tell you it's not. There's a number of different factors at work here, but right now we are starting to see the beginnings, and you can witness it when you drive by a McDonald's restaurant and they say, we'll pay you $16 to work here. It's called wage push inflation, and we're in the middle of it. And we are going to see, as Bernie said, inflation like we haven't seen since the late 70s and 80s. The only way to do this is to stop the Fed. First, quantitative easing. I'm sure you're familiar with that. They're buying securities in the open market, and basically replacing it with cash. We have our monetary base is the largest it's been in history by a multiple of 5. The velocity, I don't want to get in the weeds, but the velocity of money is low. When it picks up, you're going to see it roaring, the inflationary environment. The only way to do this is stop spending. You know, Bernie, I disagree with you. I think we are broke. Our ratio of debt to GNP is now right there with Greece. If you remember, Greece went bankrupt. Now, we're a little better off because we're the largest economy in the world, and we are still the world reserve currency. If you think China is going to allow the dollar to be the world reserve currency much longer, you're sadly mistaken. They're talking about, even if it goes to a world basket, there's going to be a problem. And we aren't going to be able to borrow this money. And when you can't borrow the money, you have to raise the interest rates. And when you raise the interest rates, we're broke. We can't support the kind of level of debt that this country holds right now, $29 trillion. And yeah, we're guilty of it. Both parties are guilty of it, but the Democrats are taking it to a fine art, and we've got to stop it. We've got to go in and have enough people just saying, we aren't going to spend a dollar. And that's the way we're going to need to approach it, or we're all in trouble.
Thank you. Let's turn to Neil Patel. What do you think about stagflation?
Okay, see right now exactly going on crisis on the labor everywhere. I think if you go even hotel, they are looking for this help because we are giving the free money to everyone and they don't want to work. They're sitting home and get job just like they don't want to work because they are getting free money. So, and getting inflation actually, slowly but surely we are getting inflation. And look at the gasoline price right now. Look at everything is going up because of this all the free money we are giving to the people of our country here. And that is not the right way to do the business. in our country. Actually, we should take care of the economically, check it out, everything, and then go for it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let's turn to Matt Dolan. What about stagflation?
So a couple things. One is, I think we're going to have time to answer questions afterwards, so I'd be happy to talk about the Highway Trust Fund and repurposing of already appropriated funds. That's how you get a bill done. Brent Spence Bridge is 90% in Kentucky, so you have to make sure there's federal dollars to fix the bridge. Kentucky has put money on their end. We have put money in on our end. It's a federal project. Look, we've all agreed on the amount of spending that's coming out of Washington since Biden has been in place is too high. It's not just the ARPA plan. It is also the ability to add $300 to unemployment benefits, which in Ohio we stopped. It's also a Biden administration telling us, the state of Ohio, that we no longer can require the look for work for anyone who's receiving welfare benefits in Ohio. So you go to Washington and you make sure you understand how 4 areas work. And that's the only way we're going to stop inflation, to get these 4 areas working. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and the military is where most of your tax dollars get spent. The 2 areas that the most is Medicare and Medicaid. You send me to Washington and we can make sure that the states have more implementation. We pay for Medicaid together as our state and Fed. And the Medicare is done by the feds. They write all the rules. You drive down spending in Washington by getting those 2 under control, and let's try something novel. I've been the chairman of the state budget 3 times. Each time we passed the budget, each time the budget was balanced. Let's go to Washington and send somebody who understands, balance the budget. Have a budget first. Tell the American people how we're going to spend our money so that the hard choices are made. We haven't passed a budget under Democrats or Republicans in years.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mark Pikita. What about stagflation?
Wow. I thought we were all Republicans here, but I guess Matt is the Democrat representative. He sounds to me like Rob Portman 2.0. I mean, with a different timbre of voice, it would be Rob Portman sitting there, spewing acronyms and numbers and all the rest and never getting anything done. And he makes it sound, being in the Ohio legislature, like he can't do anything. How about we nullify some of this stuff and tell the feds we're not going to do it? But of course, Mike DeWine has his finger in everything and doesn't want to do that because Mike is a Democrat along with Matt Dolan, okay? So stagflation, I lived through it. It's miserable. And here's the most miserable thing about it. It's almost impossible to get out of. It takes forever to work out of it. And I think Mike would confirm that. It is miserable. We are heading to Venezuela, my friends. We're printing money like Venezuela, and guess what? We can't get toilet paper here either, right? I couldn't get steaks at Kroger for like 7 weeks. This is America. This is ridiculous. So we need to send citizen candidates to Washington who are business people that understand this stuff. And you just listen to Matt, a career politician, in the sense of all of the rest of us in comparison, and you see exactly what you get if you continue to send career politicians to Washington who have no business experience, have never created a job, and don't understand how finances work. That $1.9 trillion infrastructure bill is not all infrastructure, and it will add to the debt, as Bernie said. Don't fall for it.
Thank you. I want to turn to another subject. As we all know, the issue of social media, and particularly the large technology companies, has become very controversial. And the question for each of you is, would you support appropriate regulation of big tech? Let's start with Jane Timkin.
Social media and the big tech companies in our country have run amok, and they are in bed with the Democrats. We have seen Instagram, Facebook, Twitter silence conservatives, silence our voices, attack our First Amendment rights. We've seen them harm our girls and our teenagers with no consequences. In my opinion, these social network big tech companies have become too big, and they are controlling too much of our dialogue in this country. We are one of the greatest, we are the greatest country in the face of this earth because of our constitutional rights and freedoms and our First Amendment freedom of speech that's under attack. These people want to control more than just our speech. They want to control our policy. They are in bed with the White House. You saw Jen Psaki, my favorite redhead, say that she's actually calling out tweets and social media posts and sending them to these companies to take them down and censor people when they were people criticizing the White House's COVID response. Look, this is going to have a long-term effect on our democracy, on our debate and dialogue, and it is about our freedoms. I'm a Republican, but I think just like every other aspect of our economy, there's several things that we do regulate. These companies have blown through the Section 230 that afforded them immunity, that they can do carte blanche, whatever they want. But they're throttling people. They silenced President Trump, but they have the Taliban leaders still up there. They need to be regulated in taking away their immunity, and I think some of them are too big and should be broken up. I know Bernie will say, oh, you break them up, then everyone else, they'll start another one. But we have to control this because it is poisoning our country and poisoning our children. And it is one of the biggest issues that we have facing our country right now. And there's too many people in Washington who are in bed with big tech, a lot of Democrats, but a lot of Republicans as well. As a mom, I want them to stop this.
Thank you. Let's turn to Neil Patel. What about regulating big tech?
Actually, I'm for it. Actually, we should regulate because those companies, exactly what they are doing, even Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram, all those, they're controlling our nation, our kids, even our people here. You know, whatever they want to do, they put it on the actually showing that, and they even stopped even President Trump, one side last year even. And actually Taliban, just Jane says, they still put them on and they didn't cut it off. See, we should have regulation done for them, regulated for the tech company, and I think go forward for it.
Thank you. Matt Dolan, what about big tech?
So I was one of the first ones to, when President Trump did get censored, that I went on Twitter, which I don't delete, and called it out. I mean, you cannot decide, these quasi-government entities cannot decide what we are going to hear from fellow citizens. So in this case, I think if they're going to act as a quasi-government company, then we got to look at 230, which is the immunity. But I think you're going to run into problems long term with internet and these social platforms if you go too far in 230. So to me, it's provide more platforms so that there is no government deciding which of the 4 or 5 we're going to pick from. You allow for the development of more platforms. President Trump's trying to get one. There's others out there now, which allows then the market to decide which of these platforms you're going to go to, and no one's censoring anybody. You go and look to see where you want to get your information. And I guarantee you that the ones that work, the advertising dollars will follow.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mark Pikita. What about big tech?
I'm just stunned again, Matt. So I'm not a big regulatory guy. I think we need less regulation. We've got 175,000 pages of regulation, much of it conflicting, that creates many, many problems for businesses and citizens in the United States. I think what we need to do is we really need to look at this unholy alliance between the big tech companies and the Democrats and the government. And I think that we have antitrust, we have we have restraint of trade, we have those kind of laws in place that if we had a Department of Justice that wasn't crooked, right, and we had an FBI that wasn't compromised, the FBI needs to be, we need to take a flamethrower to the FBI and rebuild it from the ground up. Everybody that says, oh, but there are great agents at the bottom, I don't think so. I think that there's a culture that's been there that we need to take a flamethrower to, as I said, and rebuild. Now, if we had a Department of Justice that would use the rules and the laws that we've already got, I think that would go a long way to telling these big companies that we don't like what they're doing. And in terms of Section 230, I think Matt's like, we can't go too far. I think with Section 230, we can't go far enough. The Bar DOJ sent recommendations to the House and the Senate about fixing Section 230. And did any of you hear about that? No, because Mitch McConnell and the folks in Washington thought that this probably wasn't a good idea. And I'm guessing it had something to do with campaign finances. And who knows? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it sure seems like these companies have a lot of influence in Washington while we are sitting here complaining, right? It's everybody, right? It's not just us. There are Democrats that do not like what these companies are doing, and our representative in Washington, our representatives in Washington aren't doing anything about it on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. Let's turn to Mike Gibbons. What do you think about big tech?
It's a real problem. The Sherman Antitrust Act and the Clayton Antitrust Act, they're not sufficient to break up Facebook, unfortunately, I believe. And but I will tell you this: our government could not burn a book. They would not, there would be an immediate lawsuit, and you would be a breach of First Amendment rights. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they're conspiring with the government. There's a First Amendment case here, and I can tell you, I'd be pounding on the table from day one. They cannot allow censorship and be a private company. Actually, if you're a private company, you can allow censorship because you have a decision of whatever you want to do, but they're no longer a private company. Actually, what they are is really kind of a sovereign nation. I mean, they're interfering with elections all over the world. They're deciding who they want in office. They just decided they wanted Joe Biden in office and spent billions of dollars in in-kind benefit for the Biden campaign. I'm not a litigious guy, but I can tell you right now, the Supreme Court will see it the way I'm talking about right now, and these people will be stopped from their censorship. Breaking them up, I mean, they broke up AT&T. All you had was a bunch of mini AT&Ts, and back then there was actually some conservatives running AT&T. Right now, you just have a bunch of mini woke Facebooks all over, and they do the same thing. I'm involved with a website, or actually an app that effectively is to try to solve this problem. The problems are incredible. You cannot have an app unless Apple lets you have an app. They're controlling social media. So that's a big problem. So we have to skirt our rhetoric enough to allow Apple to have an app.
Bernie Moreno, big tech.
Yeah, if all the questions could be about tech and cars for the rest of the day, that'd be fantastic. So we have to separate it into two buckets. There's Google and Amazon is one group of companies, and all these social media platforms are another. So with Google, I would support the idea that Google, the search engine, just because of its sheer size and what's called market effect, that should be regulated like a utility. In fact, the Attorney General of Ohio and I discussed that 3 years ago, and he's moving forward with a lawsuit on that. And I think that's a great approach for Google. All the other ancillary companies can be private, independent. We just have to be really careful here, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe in the free enterprise system, so we got to be really careful. With Amazon, there's a company called AWS. You probably don't know unless you're in the tech business. They basically control all cloud computing in America. That is a very, very different company than Amazon that you click a button and a pair of shoes shows up tomorrow morning, right? Which is cool, by the way. But that AWS also should be looked at as a utility and separated from the other Amazon divisions. Now let's talk about the social media platforms. Imagine 15 years ago, what could go wrong when you post a picture of your next door neighbor and a dog, right? Because that's how these platforms started, and all of a sudden now they're Satan incarnated. What happened is we had policymakers in DC, because we don't have term limits in DC, that have no idea about any of how this stuff works. So they didn't put in the appropriate, what I would call guardrails. I prefer that word than regulation. So there's 3 things that I would recommend that I would push forward as United States Senator. Number 1, a private company and these social media platforms cannot conspire in any way with any government official to give them any input on censoring. It didn't just start with Jen Psaki, by the way. That had been going on for a long time in California with California state officials bullying those social media platforms. So that's number 1, because like Mike said, that's a First Amendment issue. Secondly, you have to have one-click unsubscribe and be able to take your data with 1 click and move it to any other platform. If you've ever tried to get rid of Facebook, it's 29 steps, and then a guy shows up at your door and goes, "Are you sure?" Right? And then the minute you accept any picture, boom, your whole profile's back live like nothing happened. So you got to have a one-click auto remove. And the third one, this is really important. We never signed up for them to sell our data the way they sell our data. So it has to be an equitable deal. Sell all my data. I'll check in everywhere. I'll post pictures of everything I eat. I want a piece of the action. So there has to be some sort of deal that goes along with that. You do those 3 things, I think we'll be in good shape. But we got to be really careful about over-regulating these companies. That's what they're regulated heavily in China. That's why they've taken those lessons and brought them to the U.S. We got to be really, really careful about that.
Well, thank you very much. It's my sad occasion, my sad duty to bring this great discussion to an end. We will have an opportunity afterwards to talk to our candidates. And Steve, it's your turn to take over the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I appreciate that. You know, I just want to say thank you to our candidates today. All of you could be other places. All of you are people who have lots of other things going on in your life, but you're choosing to run for office, and it's thankless. In May, most of you will go back to whatever you're doing. Somebody will emerge to sort of run, and the time that you spent, you know, it's time you can be doing it. So we really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate, too, where you have specific answers and ideas. That's what people want to hear. We have a whole range of views here that some may agree with you vehemently, some may disagree with you vehemently, but they're all interested in what you might do in the role. So the specifics you provide around the things that you want to do and the way you'll represent us is very much appreciated. That's what this is about today. If you liked what somebody said, make sure you talk to them and their teams afterwards. I'm sure they'll love your support. If you didn't like what they said, talk to them about why they think what they think, because you know, they're not coming up with this stuff out of nowhere. They've got a point of view that they'd like to share. And so use this evening to interact with them, to interact with each other. We've got drinks and appetizers out there, so we want you to enjoy that. A couple just closing notes here. If I can get my notes here. Thank you to you, Dr. Green, for your facilitation today. We appreciate that. It was great to have you here and talking with our candidates. I want to thank our presenting sponsor tonight, Charter Communications. Also, our premier sponsor, the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, and our supporting sponsors, Akron Children's Hospital, Brouse McDowell, Huntington Bank, State and Federal Communications, Key Bank, Retzel and Andrus, and the Summit County Young Republicans. Like I said, we have food and drinks out there. Some of you may want to drink more than others tonight based on what you heard tonight, so feel free to do that. But again, please enjoy each other's company. It's great to be back together. We enjoy doing that. If you enjoyed the conference today, please consider attending the Bliss Institute's State of the Parties reception at the University of Akron on November 4th at 5:15. Dr. Green and Matt Akers, who's around here, can provide you more information about it, but they're going to look at the 2020 election and the upcoming midterms, so they can get you more details on that. This concludes the first part of our event tonight. Thanks again for everybody for showing up and coming out, and please enjoy some hospitality with us this evening. Thank you all.